I see we've got some folks coming in. All right, so I'll go ahead and get us started. Um, my name is Clint Hale. I'm a transportation planner at the North Central Texas Council of Governments. I'll tell you a little bit more about what that means here in a moment. But here's what we're going to do today. Um, each of us, me, Brenda, Don, we're all going to give a quick introduction about who we are and our organizations and our role there. And then we're going to go into a discussion about, we're going to go in our panel discussion and cover three big questions. Those are, why Dallas? Why is this a good place to do work in the world of connected and automated vehicles and AI machine learning related to that? So then the second question is, how can startups and entrepreneurs, how can they find partnerships with companies like Kodiak and Ericsson? And then how can they seek investment from some of the bigger companies like Ericsson that are trying to do a lot of really interesting stuff in this space? And then the third big question is, what's the blueprint, so to speak, for as far as a blueprint is available, what are some of the things built into what makes success possible and likely in this world? So, and then after that, we'll go to questions and answers. So I'm going to try to leave at least 15 minutes for that, and at the very least, if we don't get to it sooner. And I'll go to Don and Brenda here in a moment. But let me just cover some terms real quick, more for the sake of I'll probably say them than anyone else will. But CAV, connected and automated vehicles. What we're referring to there is, on the connected side, we're talking about, most of us, that have new cars, we know that the car is reporting back to the mothership with information about our vehicle and driving behaviors and all that. We know that, if you have an insurance app on your phone that's tracking and reporting, your driving behavior, like you signed up for it, hopefully. You have this app in your car, that's a connected vehicle technology as well. What about, the more advanced level of connected vehicle technology is, vehicles talking to each other. That's more of a coming down the pipeline, as well as vehicles talking to infrastructure. And, that's happening now at different degrees of sophistication, but it's definitely something that will, become elevated as time goes on, and lots of problems to solve in the world of vehicles talking to infrastructure. Now, automated vehicles, we're talking about specifically, you can talk about the 5 levels of automation for automated vehicles, but we're just referring to, in general, technology that's trying to make vehicles self-driving. Now, between the world of connected and then automated vehicles, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of communication and coordination has to happen. And in that world, there's a whole host of, what's driving a lot of the advancement between the two is advances in AI machine learning. So again, lots of problems to solve there, lots to do. Okay, so that's what terms mean. If I rattle off CAV, connected and automated vehicles, that's what we're referring to. All right, so I'll just go ahead and dive into covering my portion here. And then I'll have Brenda and Don introduce themselves as we go along. So NCTCOG, or the North Central Texas Council of Governments, we are the region's MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization. There's a quiz after this, so take good notes. I'm just providing a little bit of context here so you know why we're in the discussion. But when I say our region, I'm referring to the 16 county DFW region. So about 9.5 million people, expected to be about 12 million here in the next 15 to 25 years. Our agency plans all the roadways in the region that are 4 lanes and up, and when we plan those, we then assign money to them. So about $136 billion worth of funds being planned and assigned to projects. TxDOT does the building. And for further context, there's a MPO, a Metropolitan Planning Organization, in every urban area over 50,000 people. So we get a big regional view, and we've got a lot of responsibility when it comes to transportation in the region. Now, my role there is I'm part of a small team focused on how do we as a planning agency account for increasing roadway and vehicle automation? What kind of impacts are those going to have as we go forward? And so we've already done a lot of, projects here and there that focus on equipping, traffic signals with more data collection and sharing information, and as well as, how do we help vehicles communicate better with the infrastructure? So also to that end, we've recently released a request for proposals, an RFP, to launch a region-wide planning exercise that will account for a more automated transportation future in the region. Again, what on a regional scale are the impacts, and how do we look at that? So we closed the RFP, and now we're in the process of selecting folks, and so more to follow on that in time. We've also acted, another big role we play is we're a liaison in the region between, the people who want to come to the region and launch a startup, the automated vehicle startup. We're a liaison between them and local government. So how do those two interact, as well as how do they then connect with other big stakeholders in the region, like real estate developers, big campuses, universities. So we're trying to build relationships there between the people trying to do the technology and the people who own the roads and have to keep the roads moving, or own the campus and have to keep it running and are responsible for safety. So we do a lot of connection building there and relationship building, and we do a lot of recruiting folks to the region is another big role we play. So if you're on the line and you're involved already with automated vehicles, you've probably heard from us, because we think the region is really primed to host a lot of deployments, and there's a lot of learning potential here, and a lot of opportunities to go ahead and really make your projects happen and start to reach commercialization. So what are some of the things that have happened in the region? I keep talking big. So in our region, we've had the things I can talk about that aren't still just in the works. We've had at least 2 what you could call robo-taxi, to keep it simple, where a vehicle pulls up, on demand, takes people somewhere. We've had 2 major deployments of that in the region. Both of those were hosted by Drive AI, Don, who you'll hear from in a moment, is one of the folks who helped bring them to the region and was one of their ops guys. We've had 2 people mover projects in the region. One was in Arlington, and when I say people mover, think of a box or a tram on wheels that guides itself. We had one in Arlington, out in the stadium area, running between stadiums, and then we have an active one out at the airport right now, at DFW Airport. We've had at least 2 sidewalk delivery robot deployments in the region. One right now is active at University of Texas, Dallas. Shout out to Starship. They're the folks running that one. We've got at least 3 very active freight, automated freight companies in the region. Dallas, or DFW, is a huge logistics hub, and so it makes a lot of sense to get that kind of deployment up and running here. And hopefully you'll hear more about that here in a second. We also have at least 1 yard operations, automated yard operations company up and running in the region. So, and we've got several folks we're talking to, and we're constantly recruiting and trying to show people there's a lot to do here. Now, if you're in this space and you want to get connected to the region, you want to start talking to local governments, other stakeholders, we're happy to talk to you and see what we can do to help you. So feel free to reach out. I'll post something I'll post my email in the chat bar here in a moment. But that's what I do. That's why I'm part of the conversation. We're heavily involved in this and really have a lot of stake in how this benefits the region and our transportation system. So I will, do we have Don or Brenda on the line yet? I mean, I could talk all day about this. Triet. There we go. Hey, there's Don.
Hey.
And Brenda. How we doing?
Hey, well, that was an unpleasant experience.
Yeah, getting logged in. But hey, we're all here. I've introduced me. I've introduced NCTCOG. I enthralled them with what we're doing in the public sector. But I'm going to hand it over right now to Brenda. And Brenda, introduce yourself. talk about what Ericsson is doing in this space and your role there, and then we'll go over to Dawn and do the same here in a moment.
Okay, perfect. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, can hear you.
Okay, great. So I am Dr. Brenda Connor, and I am the Director of IoT Portfolio Application at Ericsson in North America. Ericsson, if you're not familiar with it, is headquartered in Plano, Texas, just up the road from Dallas. And we have roughly 9,643 employees in North America, about 100,000 employees globally. So we're quite a big organization. And our vision, Ericsson's whole vision, and you'll know us as a telecommunications or an information and communications technology giant, but our vision and purpose is empowering a more intelligent and sustainably connected world by relentlessly innovating network technologies that are easy to use, adapt, and scale. And I've been with Ericsson for over 26 years, and I've really benefited from being engaged with leading innovations that matter. The whole cellular revolution has occurred in the recent couple of decades, and we're now here talking about connected and autonomous vehicles. Ericsson has been helping to drive the connected and autonomous vehicle space specifically in three main areas, I think, and I'm not sure how aware folks are. But being a big company, we help drive standards such as the cellular V2X standards that I think many of you on the call are familiar with. And there's a lot of startup activity happening in the vehicle to everything space. We also support different coalitions. You may have seen the recent announcement on the Pathways Coalition, which is it's really a cross-sector coalition that's focused at partnering for sustainable decarbonization of heavy transport. And I think that's really an important area that, we talk a lot about the autonomous vehicles, like little vans that you can get in and the consumers can experience that. But the impact of autonomous vehicles to industry, which will drive the investment then in innovations that humans, individuals can benefit from. So we kind of focus on feeding the chain, which then feeds the chain, because it is an ecosystem. And then lastly, the third area, Ericsson has a portfolio for our customers in the connected and autonomous vehicle space. Some may know that, for example, we have been working with Volvo's connected vehicle partner since 2012. And we also have been working with various consortiums that were driving concepts 2014 and earlier related to things like platooning, which we now see in everyday vehicles. You can't even buy a car that doesn't have what they call for the consumer adaptive cruise control, which is a evolution of the initial platooning things we were doing a decade ago, right? So I see Ericsson has really been advocating for not just innovations, but innovations that can scale via standardization and by knowledge sharing across industry segments. So I think that has been a big contribution the company has made, and I'm proud to be a part of that. But I do want to make a shout out for the whole sustainability and transportation area and autonomous work that's being done at DFW. How many people know that DFW was the first certified carbon neutral airport on October 11 of, 2016? What a significant area achievement to be the first in that. And they have been looking at autonomous vehicles in airports as another area that Ericsson spends innovations in, because if you think about it, there's a big opportunity. And of course, COVID may have, who knows what happens with COVID-19 and the impact it has, right, on what plans industry was having. But you can think about areas like airports where they're moving a lot of goods and people and these sorts of things, and in restricted areas where automation would make it such that you could safely move things around. And so this whole connected and autonomous vehicle contributions to those type of industrial areas, if you will, is another area that we have. And then a final shout out is for the Smart Factory Ericsson opened up in Louisville, Texas, where we actually will be opening up for the public to be able to look at the automations that we're doing up there with the machine learning and that sort of thing. And so, do you put into the autonomous transportation, the sort of the autonomous moving forklifts, so I'm just kind of saying that there's a lot of applicability in adjacent industries that the work we've been investing on in the autonomous transportation space has seen a benefit, and to the extent that you can work on an innovation that can contribute to multiple adjacent industries means that you have more of a footprint for where you can sell your goods and wares, right? So something to think about is not just the sexy area that you might be thinking about, but so what else could happen next to it, right?
Right.
So I'll throw that out there as well. So thanks, that's me. I'm a data scientist, cybersecurity expert, and I'm passionate about cellular enabled business models. So looking forward to the conversation, Clint. Glad to be
Great.
here.
Yeah, so glad you're here. And we've had a chance to work with you a little bit and interact, and in this whole ecosystem has been really fun seeing y'all at work.
Thank you.
All right, Don. So you're the boots on the ground guy. So tell us about yourself, about Kodiak, and what you do there, and just so y'all are aware. After this, we'll go into the 3 big questions, and then I'm going to try to leave at least 15 minutes to get questions from the audience too. So, Don, tell us. Oh, Don, you're on mute.
Hey Don, if you look to the bottom of your screen, there should be a gearhead icon. Just make sure that your mic is either doing the internal mic, or if you're using any Bluetooth, make sure that one's selected. Still can't hear you. Make sure that your system preferences is allowing Hopton to access your microphone.
Yeah, it inevitably happens talking about self-driving vehicles, right? Your PowerPoint or audio. Hey, Brenda, while they get that worked on, do you mind talking a little bit about I'm glad you mentioned it, the automated distribution center up in Louisville. What's that project kind of part of? And then are there plans to tie that into autonomous transportation of goods?
No, what it is our Smart Factory is where we produce our cellular equipment that's used in North America. So like the 5G base stations. But it's not what it produces that's the exciting part, and the reason to mention it, it's the how we do it. So we're actually showcasing, the whole industrial internet 4.0 that everybody likes to talk about. It's practically actually need to do it. And so to demonstrate what can be done and how you can utilize things like autonomous when we talk about autonomous vehicles, it's not just the cars that go on the street, it's also the robots and the forklifts that move around the factory. It's anything that can movement of people and goods, right? And if it's the extent that it can be autonomous and also potentially electrified, means that you can focus on sustainability, right? So I see that a lot of this connected and autonomous vehicle work has a potential to actually also help us with sustainability, right? And you've seen that as well with some of the initiatives that NCTCOG has been involved with, where you're not only looking at autonomous, it's also electrification of the autonomous unit, especially when it's relative to autonomous equipment moving goods.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And so you guys have a really big picture view because you're a big company. So let's just go ahead and jump in. What's what marks DFW as an interesting area to find problems to solve in automated and connected vehicles?
Well, what's interesting about the DFW area is the confluence, the bringing together of various powerhouses in the industry, right? Look at Toyota moving its headquarters right across. Toyota moved two important facilities right around Ericsson, right? So if you go a couple of buildings to the left or to the north of Ericsson on the same road, because now I'm got the congestion in front of the office if I were driving there. We have that huge Toyota headquarters, right? Huge, but it's fantastic. It's good to go and look at. And then across the street from Ericsson, again, you can walk to, is your Toyota Connected, their innovation house for looking at what they're doing in their connected and autonomous vehicles, right? So you've got Ericsson with its connected and autonomous vehicle portfolio. You've got Toyota, a very innovative firm. You've got and their Toyota Connected. Also in this area, you have Dallas, City of Dallas, who invested in uplifting, not just uplifting their connected traffic system, but also making it a system that could be open and interact in this autonomous world, right? And we've had conversations related to that. But then I think what you also have here, and often on these calls, and DEC has been a sponsor with you as well, is the Dallas Innovation Alliance. The Dallas Innovation Alliance has been a meeting place for innovators to be able to come in and interact with each other, with sponsorship from not only Toyota and different proof of concepts that have been done in the transportation space with Toyota and DIA in the south end of Dallas, but also then you have AT&T, whose sponsorship and leadership with the DIA has been foundational as well, right? And we firmly believe that in this connected autonomous vehicle world, there's a lot of conversation about the peer-to-peer link, whether it should be DSRC or cellular V2X, but you talk about autonomous vehicles, and regardless of how the peer-to-peer connection is done, there's going to be also a network connection up to be able to get the various high bandwidth, low latency communications needed to share the sort of mapping outside of the very what can be reached with the peer-to-peer communication range.
All right, now?
Right? Yep. So
Yeah,
welcome,
yeah.
Don. We can hear you.
Can you hear us, Don?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Technology is so hard. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's hard. Yeah, getting cars to drive themselves. It's a
That's
whole new ballgame.
That's easy. That's no big deal.
Well, okay. So Brenda, thank you. She just gave us some perspective on what makes DFW unique.
Yep.
And we can cover that some more later too. But Don, go ahead and introduce yourself, Kodiak, and then jump on into why y'all came to DFW.
Yeah, that's Don Leopard. I'm an ops guy with Kodiak. I've run Texas operations, so I help kind of get it from the ground up, build the operations team, both partnerships, all that other kind of stuff. Kodiak is really specialized in autonomy as far as where it comes to over-the-road trucking. The unique thing about what we believe in Kodiak anyway is that we're really comprised of a bunch of veterans. So like we're the guys who've really cut our teeth over the past 10 years in autonomy. I know it doesn't sound that long, but 10 years in autonomy is like, you're pretty OG at that point. You've been around for quite some time, So we really pride ourselves we've all been at these other large scale companies such as Waymo, Otto, Uber, things along those lines. And we have done deployments before. So we've cut our teeth. We know kind of what's going on. And over that time frame, which really came to us, that's kind of like helped form this, is that over the road trucking, we believe, is probably going to be the first large scale use of autonomy. And if you look at that, the reason why is robotaxis is great. It's going to be there. I've worked on robotaxis before. It's just a much longer road to go down, where over the road trucking is, if you can get them out on the interstate, everybody's pretty much driving the same direction, pretty much going the same speed. So it's not an easy problem, but it is a much more solvable problem in a short time frame. So that's what Kodiak really specializes in, is that middle mile portion. We're not trying to focus our technology right now on that first and last mile segment. There's lots of people that are working towards solving that. We want to be kind of the ninjas when it comes to that middle mile segment of getting it out on the open road, getting it to cruise. Because once you dive actually into the freight segment, you start learning really fast about where there's some inefficiencies in the model. Hours of service, staffing, trucker supply, just things like that. It needs something to help that efficiency piece. So that's what Kodiak is about. We're really about working on that middle mile segment to help move freight from major freight hubs across the United States to be able to kind of get there. What's really nice is that we chose Texas. I would like to believe they chose Texas because I'm from Texas, and who doesn't want me working for them? You know what I mean? That's what I'd like to believe. I don't think that's the case though. We chose Texas primarily for like three major reasons. The first one would be the regulatory landscape is really nice in Texas. And we can dive a little bit deeper into this, but when I say it's really nice in Texas, it's not the Wild West, because there's some states that just like, we want autonomy here, come here, we're not going to regulate you at all. And those are the scariest states to operate in. You want some kind of framework. Number one, that way everybody that's working in the same space as you is doing it correctly and safely. But then also you want that framework. That way if we're going to invest millions of dollars in time and energy to be able to launch operations and move something there, that there's some framework. That way it can kind of grant a little bit of a security blanket of saying it's worth it to move there. The second thing is the weather in Texas, outside of hurricanes and things like that, is actually pretty promising for that. It's mostly sunny. Weather is good. Don't get me wrong. It's really rough on components. The heat, the humidity, the dust, the bugs. We don't shy away from that though, because we believe that builds a better product, right? Like, yeah, we could go deploy our out in the middle of Arizona like a lot of other people do, where it's sunny and it just gets hot and they don't really deal with that many components. We want to try to really work on like real world deployments, which is kind of like what we're really passionate about. And then the last thing is really just kind of the highway structure in Texas. If you look at it from a freight side, if you look at just the overall interstate structure, it's very well maintained. It's very well laid out. And it's just really beneficial as far as that's concerned. So when you combine getting me as an employee plus those other things, it's just a no-brainer to come to the DFW market. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm obviously a partisan for DFW, but it's nice to hear, what really makes it stand out. And Texas at large, at Senate Bill, for those of you that want to research, Senate Bill 2205 was kind of our big piece of legislation in the state that kind of opened the door for a lot of, freedom of movement for automated vehicle companies to get on the road. So, okay, let me turn to our next question. I'm going to kind of roll them together and open it up to whoever wants to start first. But, what are opportunities, where in your industry or in your companies and in your startup, are there opportunities for partnerships and investment, as well as, we'll go ahead and roll in sort of the blueprint idea. Like what sort of problems still exist that are really worth going after, that y'all aren't necessarily going after, that y'all just see available?
If you want to go first, Brenda, you can, or like.
No, go ahead, Don. Interested in your perspective.
Yeah. Ours is really interesting from like a partnership standpoint is we're really good at autonomy. We've all done it for a while. So what we're really focused on partnerships is really kind of really starting to grow some of that logistics DNA because there is a lot of tech and logistics. A lot of people think that if you think about freight movement, you think it's just truckers moving stuff, and it's not. There's a vast amount of logistics that falls into that. So we're really working on those kind of partnerships as far as that's concerned. When it comes to like where we're focusing in the space, I can tell you right now, like a big thing for us is sensor testing. And there's been, over the last 5 years, there's been like credible innovations as was you see in LiDAR, narrow facing cameras, things like that. So that's what we're really kind of dialed in on as far as the partnership is concerned, is really trying to find out what is the best sensors, what can take the abuse of what we've talked about earlier, the wind, the rain, the things along those lines, to be able to go that route. So that's really where we're looking at from the partnerships. From the software side, obviously a lot of that is just going to be IP for us. That's what we do. And we're not necessarily looking for relationships and partnerships in that side. But really robustness of sensors, sensor suites is the stuff that we're really getting, because we believe in stay in your lane, like do what you're good at. You know what I mean? We're really good at software. We're really good at building that. We don't need to try to become hardware specialists and do that kind of thing. There's people that's been working on that far longer than us that are subject matter experts in that regard. So,
right. That's great. So sensors are the big area, and I've seen your trucks, and it's pretty interesting the way y'all, like that has been y'all's biggest challenge. You'll always go over the things you had to solve for sensors. So that's,
yeah, especially like in our world, because if you talk about like what a truck does, I mean, it moves constantly. It drives through all kinds of weather situations. When you want to start talking about sensor robustness, I mean, the harshness and vibration that happens to sensors on a semi truck, the torque that's generated, the over the road conditions, the weather, it's a really, really interesting kind of mechanical engineering case study of, you think this LiDAR is good, put it on a truck and run it up and down to Houston for about 2 months straight, and you'll just see how good that LiDAR really is. So it's very interesting. So
that's exciting. All right. Hey, Brenda, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, sure. So you mentioned a lot of things, so I'll take it broader and bring it back down, and I'll also talk about sensors there as well, Don. So if I look at how Ericsson is actually working with innovative companies or startups, I think there's a lot to consider there. And we actually try to be easy to work with. We have a Quest for Easy charter in our company. And so we put everything on our website. So you've got to click on it and boop, you're there. And you have a way to do a process by which you can interact. So one area that's important for startups is on the whole funding area and investment. So let me start there. Some people don't know that we have an Ericsson Ventures group. And Ericsson Ventures has on our website, when you go to Ericsson Ventures, there's like 9 tiles for the areas that we invest in, and some of the startups are listed that we have invested in also, just to give some kind of ideas. But it's often the case that folks are looking for how can they get some kind of funding injection, and if it aligns with an investment area that Ericsson has, then there's a reason to reach out and touch, and they'll tell you, and there's a process to go through, pretty systematic, about how do we weave through the ones that are requesting, right? So funding and for investment, then Ericsson helps with there. And let me just put that into perspective. Ericsson, we're actually a fairly big company. We have roughly, our 2019, we were a over $26 billion company. And we invest inside of our company roughly $4.5 billion in R&D, and that's the big B, billion. That's a lot of zeros. And we operate in over 180 countries, but we have roughly, of our 99,000 employees globally, roughly 25,000 of those are in R&D. So we really are working internally. So we don't so much need to have the investment coming from the outside, because it's kind of coming also from the inside. That's why we have an Ericsson Ventures that looks systematically to make sure we don't that we are looking outside as well. We also look to foster an ecosystem, because we don't try we do what we do well, but we don't try to do everything. And so we believe that the ecosystem needs help. So if you look under Ericsson Partners, you'll see there is an automotive ecosystem there that you can click on and become a part of the automotive ecosystem. There's an industrial internet ecosystem, and I'm sure there's a third one there too. It's not coming to my head right now, but we categorize those ecosystems, because guess what? There's not one IoT ecosystem, there are many. And so you'll see 3 of the focus ecosystems that we have under our partner area. Of course, if you have a product that you think we just got to have, we have a supplier area as well, that there's a process that you can, if you have a commercial widget of some sort you think is just right within our main business, then there's a process for that as well. And I'd say we also are supporting industry initiatives such as CTIA, who now to the sensors. You know, there's a lot of different sensors out there of different maturity, if you will, right? And it's not always easy from architecture to tell what you got. And so what CTIA has done, I don't know if you're familiar with CTIA, it's a consortium that if you look them up, CTIA used to stand for one thing, and now over time it doesn't stand for that anymore. But CTIA has an IoT cybersecurity certification program. So there's Ericsson's one of the investors in a lab to support that initiative for CTIA, so that devices can go in and help to become certified cybersecurity certified IoT devices, right? Which is really emerging in its understanding of its importance, so that you don't become an attack vector, right? And especially if you take Don's example where he's moving heavy trucking, right? Who wants to have their truck hacked through a sensor that they didn't even understand was an attack vector when they connected it? And so, you know, and as a integrator, you need that kind of help to have each of these things vetted, so that you don't have to be an expert on every little thing. So these kinds of IoT cybersecurity certification programs we felt were foundational to helping, you know, scale the industry. So there's that program as well that we have invested in supporting on behalf of growing the ecosystem from the bottoms up. So those are some of the ways that we can help connect people, support people, or get to know people through those stated ways.
Right. And Britt, I'll ask you first, like, what's the pathway for folks to build those partnerships?
Well, like I said, the first way is, let's say you want to be a partner in the automotive ecosystem, then you click there and they've got a process for you to follow, right? And I can't quote what the exact steps in that process are, because you just click on the link and then away you go, right? So
And it's magic.
Yeah, then it's magic. It's our intent is to make it easy to connect, right? And so, and in some, on to the extent that, like aligned with our smart factory focus in the industrial internet, that I know because of the smart factory, and everybody's been through this. So what are we doing there? Training inside. We actually put some of this training for our partners online. So we actually invest in these kind of training of folks about what's important in that ecosystem and how to, you know, so it depends on the ecosystem path you go through, what the maturity level is and what they have available to you, and kind of a thing. Because the reality is, with our portfolio, connected and autonomous vehicles, our main customers are either automotive OEMs such as Volvo, whom we've been working with since 2012, and Scania and other trucking companies. Those are just the public ones I can say. Or telecom operators, our traditional customers that we work through. And everybody knows Ericsson sells cellular gear to every, you know, over every operator on the planet, right, that we can. So yeah.
Well, that's great. Don, tell me quick, what's your pathway for partnerships?
It's kind of the same thing. You go to our website, we have different links to where you can look in and get different things. Obviously, being in this space, there's a lot of interest in that, especially when it comes to like sensor software, machine learning, kind of like things like that. So the best place is just go to our website. There's links in there that can put you into the right people that can like address those either potential partnerships, questions, thoughts, that type of thing. So,
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank y'all. Let me go ahead and jump right into questions here. We've got a few minutes. Kelly Schneider, there's one for me here. So let me answer this quickly. So the way we're trying to bring automated vehicle technology to the wider public is, one, we're here as a government agency to help make a level playing field for whoever comes to the region. If you're an automated vehicle startup, you know, you're focused on transportation in whatever capacity, and you want to connect with the infrastructure owner operators, we're here to help you do that, no matter who you are. We've had a lot of folks come, and then a lot of folks kind of fall off the map after we connect with them. But you know, we're gonna take whoever shows up and start making those connections. So that's one way, kind of a very direct, kind of grand way is through this. At the very beginning, I mentioned a request for proposals we just initiated and now have closed, and we're in the process of selecting folks. That RFP was part of a larger program that's being funded. In the other segment of this program is focused on strategic investments. How do we look at, as a public agency, how do we apply automated vehicle technology in an appropriate way? And I mean, we can't just go around using it for everything. We want to use it in a way that's appropriate to a certain situation that serves a real transportation pinch point. So you mentioned transit. Transit's going to be a lot of those and connecting people to jobs. And we are in a very spread out region. And so how part of that's going to be looking at, are there ways to connect more people to transit through automated vehicles? But we're going through a whole process of looking at a process. That's what we do for government. But we are looking at a process of how to use automated vehicle technology to make transportation more equitable throughout the region. So that's what I'll say about that. And then Chase has a question about potholes, and I think Don, you may be able to answer this. Do potholes pose a serious barrier to deployment in the region?
Potholes are a serious issue, not a barrier. It's actually one of the things that we've done is when you talk about like public-private partnership, we've actually partnered up with TxDOT, which is really cool. So we're just burning up the interstates here, and you have to think about just the ungodly amount of data that we're capturing on the infrastructure. We actually created a system where we're actually being able to send that over to TxDOT and say, here's where your sign fell, here's where a pothole is. So we have basically a live feed going back to TxDOT saying, here's where one of your scenarios actually caused our autonomous system to disengage because of a pothole, because of a blowover sign. So it is definitely something that we note and that we work through, but that's really, it's just another piece of deployment. I definitely wouldn't call it a barrier though.
Right. Well, why did Uber Elevate choose Dallas? Because I mean, why not? Because it's great. But no, I think as far as I don't think anybody here can speak for Uber. I mean, Brenda's probably the most like spec ops person in the room right now when it comes to this stuff. So she may know more about it. But I know that just DFW Airport is a kind of it's a global air hub, and in Frisco, which is where they want to build the station, is a big that's where a lot of traffic to and from the airport goes. So Frisco is very forward thinking about transportation. So I know those two connected.
I don't want to comment on Uber, but I'd like to make a comment regarding the pothole and Don's answer there. So an interesting thing about potholes is that, we were, as a part of the earlier connected vehicle things, we had put just motion sensors so you could actually map out where the potholes are. Right. So technically, there's a lot of potholes aren't in a barrier so much as they're an opportunity for data monetization. Right. But then you have to think through the business model. If I'm able to detect these things and provide that into somebody, and it saves personnel from going around and manually mapping this thing, are they willing to pay me a nickel for that? Right? And so understanding that value chain of, I'm going to anyhow have this piece of data. Can I package it in a way that it can be shared securely and safely with the right individual in a relevant timeline that saves costs that they can spend instead on buying my thing, right? So the biggest barrier I've seen for innovators is they come into me and say, I have this great idea. I've got this widget. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then you ask them some very important questions like, so who do you think is going to benefit from this wonderful, innovative thing that's better than sliced bread? Who's going to benefit from it and who's going to pay for it? Because it can be that the one who benefits from it isn't going to pay you a nickel, right? And government's all about that, right? You're all about providing services for citizens and visitors and commerce, right? And so it isn't necessarily paid directly. There can be an indirect chain there. So understanding the value flow and how whatever it is you're trying to do fits in a value chain so that you're providing what's in it for each of those stakeholders, which can be different, so the money can flow your way. Otherwise, you end up with something cool, but you can't figure out how to get it off the table and into the hands of the ones who benefit and the ones who pay.
Right.
Right.
No, that's really good advice as people think through what kind of problems and value add they can solve.
Yeah.
Tria, I don't know if they're going to just kick us off here, but I was going to have Don address the question. It's an interesting question. What's holding back widespread autonomous truck deployment in Texas?
If I would peg one thing, what's holding it back is mindful deployment. You know what I mean? Is you can give me enough money, I'll build enough trucks, and I'll have trucks driving all over the place. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do, right? This is emerging technology. It is not buttoned down. It is still something that's in the case. I see the question in there, kind of what's the parameters as well? Well, the biggest widespread thing about what I believe is, and a lot of it's in the hardware progression, like good, robust sensors. How reliable are the sensors? Because, imagine if you have sensors go out mid-trip, it would be like what happened if you were driving and your right eye went out. You know what I mean? You can't just have sensor failure whenever you have an autonomous vehicle. So right there is a big thing of really being able to get a robust, solidified mechanical kind of solution for it, if you will. As far as what's our parameters of operating is we work day and night. Law says you need to stay in the right lane as much as possible. Our system can detect a slower moving vehicle and shoulder emergency vehicle, and then get over into the left-hand lane because it's the safest thing to do. So we can operate in all lanes. And we do have a safety driver on board as well as an engineer that ride along with to be able to make sure that. And the last piece of that question is live operation. For sure, we do on-the-road testing, but then also we're delivering freight for partners, undisclosed partners right now, but we're delivering freight for partners every day from Dallas to Houston and back. So we're logging lots of miles, not only in the development world of pulling this forward and progressing, but then we're also, which again is the thing that we're most proud of, is we're executing on this every day, because we can live in a vacuum and think we can build the best product, but anybody that's been dealing with building a product knows you can love your product and you can think it's the best thing, and right until you get it in the hands of a consumer, and they'll break it. I promise you they'll break it. So our best thing is actually taking our product that we think have right and put it out there to people that use it every day, experienced truckers, carriers, shippers, mega shippers, intermodals, and put it through its paces. And that's where you build a better product. So.
Right. Okay, well, we'll just keep answering some questions here, unless we're going to get, booted. But okay, thank you, Dom, for adding that article. Yeah, it's a really interesting tale of how it all ended up here.
It is really interesting, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so how do we feel about autonomous micro delivery services? Do you see a future for it in Dallas? Yeah, and so micro mobility will do. As you look at micromobility as a whole, both sidewalk delivery and maybe people mover service, do you see futures for that? Well, actually, I'll add something real quick to that. I think a good example is if you look at a company like eFrogs that's working in Uptown. They do electric, I think it's the Polaris Gym chassis they're working with, but they do a lot of moving folks around, and they just kind of pay for it using advertising wraps. But just an interesting use case of how, granted, that's a very dense, urban density type example, but I think there are lots of environments like that around DFW where a solution like that kind of micromobility can work. But let me open it up to y'all.
I definitely think micromobility, again, I've worked in robo-taxis and things like that, which isn't necessarily micromobility, but one thing I've learned working in the robo-taxi and the AV passenger car space is really you got to look for where your large scale deployments are going to be able to happen the fastest, right? Because everybody's looking for a path of profitability. Everybody's looking for how can we get this out there? So I personally think, micromobility, micro delivery is going to be huge. I mean, if you just look at some of the things that Nuro have accomplished, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
my personal belief is, again, this is just an ops guy talking here, but like my personal beliefs is that what's happening with COVID is even more pronounced than that. Just look how like food delivery and pickup and touchless and things like that is going on. So if anything, I think that is really even going to prove the use case more. So I think that micro delivery mobility kind of thing is going to be a rocket ship here in the very near future, just because of circumstance more than anything else. So.
Yeah, and if I add on to that circumstance in the COVID, right? So life as we know it is not going to emerge from COVID-19 in the same way. It's going to be in a different way, right? So how many people think that humans and trucking and all this other stuff, whether it's people or goods that are moving, are going to move, their movement patterns are going to be the same. They won't be, they'll be different, right? And so in order for companies that used to have one model to survive, they're actually, I mean, what company isn't sitting there and saying, I have less volume of this kind of business. And so how can I do something based on how I think the world's going to be post COVID-19? And it's going to involve something with digital services, right? And then you say, once I've enabled some more digital service capability, then microservices, being able to go smaller and go, is going to come into play. So I think that actually COVID-19 is going to accelerate some of the things that were on the horizon because of necessity. And it can be a money reason, right? I don't have the volume to run my business. I better figure out how to do something adjacent that is still within my core business, sort of, but that is an add-on to my core business, just to keep my nose above the waters.
Right. Yeah. And just one more thing about micromobility while we're on it, and we're talking about it. From your perspective, Brenda, when it comes to, let's imagine a world of widespread, a near world, not the future, but kind of a near-term world of more widespread micromobility. Does a certain type of telecom infrastructure, like, is that really what's going to make that possible, or do you see that as not a huge factor for advancement?
I think it's an absolute must for advancement, because think about with micro mobility, that means I'm going to do just a few things in different places, right? So who can afford to do that with a dedicated network of any kind that only does a few little things somewhere, right? So the nice thing about cellular, and especially with 5G, with all this network slicing, the ability to hone down the type of service to smaller pieces with what is being deployed now, then you're able to address those sorts of needs on the macro scale, but for the micro reason. Right? And you can't do that with a dedicated network. If you have density, like you said, if you have density, you can do lots of things. If you don't have density, then you need to do things taking advantage of the fact that with cellular, you can do multiple types of services on the same network, not a different network, right? So absolutely, cellular is going to enable these type of innovations to happen.
That's great. Well, thank you, Brenda. Trent, are we getting kicked off?
Yeah, I definitely want to be respectful of all of y'all's time. So I think it's time to wrap it up. But thank you to everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Brenda, Don, and Clint, for being here and being part of Dallas Startup Week.
No, thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
No problem. Thanks, guys. See y'all.
Thanks, guys.